So first we'll start with history of architecture. And in history of architecture, the first thing that comes is the prehistoric era, and it had three sub ages within it: prehistoric, and it had Stone Age, Bronze Age, and finally the Iron Age. I'll list down few shelter settlement examples in each so that you get a gist of what each age represents. In Stone Age, the first example that I would start with is Terra Amota. So these were a type of settlement that were made up with stones, sticks, mammoth skin, leaves, and stuff. So they had a elliptical or an oval shaped plan, which stones arranged, and they had two shaft areas with the middle portion being used for hearth. Hearth is nothing but a fire pit, and they used these stones and the shafts to arrange sticks all around it, so it looked something like this, something of this sort. Stones all around, your two shafts in the middle, and they placed mammal skins or leaves on top of these sticks to form a shelter. This was Terra Amot. Then there were lean-tos, which was done mostly at the summit of a mountain or a cave. So if this is the mountain, then they used the land and the mountain, and they used a tent sort of structure which was leaned against it to form a shelter. So this was lean-tos. Then they had they had Terra Amot, they had lean-tos, they had stone houses. So this was famous in Skara Brae. And these were like circular in plan, but they had huge stones forming cavity in providing insulation for the houses, and this was roughly squared and shaped, the stones. So this was stone houses. They had timber houses, and this was subdivided into three categories: single partite, dipartite, and tripartite. In single partite, the living and the kitchen was in a singular space. In dipartite, the living and the kitchen and the storage were separated. In tripartite, the living, kitchen, and storage, all three were separated. Apart from this shelters, they also had other forms of structures in Stone Age, which were menhirs, which was freestanding monolith stones, something of this sort. Then they had dolmens. This formed post and lintel kind of structure, which had 3 to 4 menhirs generally, forming a trapezium sort of stuff. So this was dolmens. And then the stone henges, which was a group of menhirs forming a circle, roughly a circle. So these were there, and this was basically Stone Age. In Bronze Age, so in Stone Age, people lived mostly individually or as a family. in Bronze Age, people understood the concept of living within a community. So they had 4 to 5 houses within a boundary. Settlement or civilization example of Bronze Age I would like to give is Harappan civilization. Of course, most of us know is Indus Valley civilization. And other thing that was famous in Bronze Age would be the beehive tombs, or the tholos or tholai. I'll talk about this a bit later. And in Iron Age, people started having added features like terraces, drainage systems, and they had tombs like broods or dunes, etc. Okay, so this was prehistoric, and I'll show you the pictures so that it is easy to understand. This is Terra Amut. This is menhirs, dolmens, and Stonehenges. Okay, next moving on is Mesopotamian architecture. In Mesopotamian architecture, there were 4 civilizations under it, and a key to remember them in the correct order that I have used for myself is SBAP. You can use your own ways to remember stuff. So the first is Sumerian, and then Babylons, and then Assyrians, and finally Persians. So it is important to remember them in this order because this is how each civilization grew. So just try to remember them in the correct order. So we'll first talk about the Sumerian civilization. No, before that, Mesopotamian civilization was based off 2 rivers, Euphrates and Tigris. Now, Sumerian and Babylon were based off Euphrates, whereas Assyrians and Persians were based off Tigris. Try to remember the river names as well because most of the civilizations were based on rivers, so it is important to remember the river names. So, Sumerian civilization. There was a famous city in Sumerian civilization which was called the city of Ur, and Sumerians were famous for making ziggurats. Now, ziggurats is something that they considered to be buildings which connects the heaven and earth, and sometimes they called it the stairways to heaven. Okay, so this connects heaven and earth, and they were generally 3-story high. Okay, so I'll draw a rough figure of a ziggurat. So it was generally 3-story high, and these were stairways, and in the ground area alone they had stairways that was going in all two directions. So this was ziggurat. I'll show the picture a bit later. And they were generally mentioned to be 3-story high, at least in the Sumerian civilization. And they also used a protection system to protect their settlement from invaders called as moat. So moat is nothing but is a water canal or a water body that is around your fortified settlement. So if you have your settlement, then around it water bodies were used, so that, and these water bodies were generally filled with crocodiles and other such predatory water animals, so that it stops the invaders from reaching into the settlement. So they used this, and they also used bitumen for waterproofing. And in the ziggurats they used burnt bricks on the outside. So exterior were made of burnt bricks and interior was made of sun dried bricks. Next, before moving on to Babylon, this is an example of ziggurat. You can see in the ground floor alone they had stairways in all the 3 direction, and from there it was just 2, and it was generally 3-story high. Okay, now Babylon. So Babylon also had moat, but they also had a protection wall addition to it, and this protection wall was called rampart. And Babylon, the famous city, Babylonian civilization, so the famous capital or the famous city is Babylon, obviously. And by hearing this name, I'm sure a lot of us remembered one of the 7 wonders of the world, which is Hanging Garden of Babylon. Next, okay, the Babylon civilization also had 8 gate system. Before you can reach into the city, they had 8 gate. You have to pass through them, and these 8 gate represent 8 gods. And the 8th gate is the famous among the all, and it is called Ishtar gate. So this gate was famous. The gate generally looked like this. And this was filled with bronze elements, artworks or sculptures, whatever you would like to call them, mostly dragons or bulls. And okay, so they were made filled with bronze sculptures or embossment, and the gate had burnt bricks on the inside, and on the outside, and this is important to remember, they used enamel or glazed bricks. And it was blue in color. So this is important to remember. So this is Ishtar Gate, and you can see the blue bricks and the bronze embossment of sculptures. Next, we'll move on to Assyrian civilization. Now I would like to first mention the famous city of the Assyrian civilization. The capital is Khorsabad. The other famous cities include city of Ashur, Nimrud, Nineveh, and of course Khorsabad. So these are the famous Assyrian civilization, and in here they used polychromatic glazed bricks. So in Babylon civilization they used blue color. Here they started making other colors as well. So it was polychromatic glazed bricks, and here the ziggurats started becoming 7-story high. In Sumerian civilization, we talked about how it was generally 3-story high. In Assyrian civilization, the ziggurats started becoming 7-story high. And they also had a famous mythical sculpture here called as the Lamassu. So, Lamassu is a human-headed bull-bodied with bird wing structure, and these are usually kept in entranceways. So it looked like this. So you see human face, bird wings, body of bull, or sometimes even lions were used. Then we'll move on to Persian civilization. So the capital is Persepolis. But other famous cities include city of Susa and Ecbatana. This is ECBATANA, Ecbatana. And in Persian, the columns were slender, so they had slender columns. And it is also believed that the characterization of columns started in the Persian civilization. So characterization of columns. They had a molded base, fluted shaft, and some ornamental structure, and then the top bracket was symmetrical bull or dragon. So molded base, fluted shaft, top bracket was symmetrical bull or dragons. And the Persians also had a throne hall which had 100 columns in it. And they also had an audience hall called as Apodana. It was audience hall. See, this is the symmetrical bull or lion top bracket. This is a classic example of Persian columns. Next, we'll move on to Egyptian architecture. So we started with prehistoric, we covered Mesopotamian, and now we are going to talk about Egyptian. This is something that everybody knows, that the Egyptian architecture was based off river Nile, and they had annual flooding. So, and this annual flooding is very similar to how Indus Valley civilization also kind of wept off. So they also had annual flooding here, and they used something called as battle wall for protection. This battle wall is like a tapering sort of wall, like this. It's tapering, and this side of the wall, mostly the plain side of the wall, it's a windowless wall. So they use that for their writing, which is called hieroglyphics. Now hieroglyphics does not contain any letters. It is made up of symbols and drawings, and they use that as a written scripture for them. Mostly the Egyptian architecture is characterized into two type of building or typology of buildings. One is tombs, and the other is mastaba. One is tombs and the other is temples. In temples, there are again two. There is mortuary temple and cult temple. And in tombs again we have two, mastaba and pyramids. They also had a third type of tombs which was not much prevalent, is the rock cut tombs. And one of the example of this rock cut tomb is Tutankhamun. At Thebes. Okay, so these two were most famous in the tombs, and this was not that prevalent, but I'm just telling here for you to remember in case it gets asked in the exam. So first we'll look into mastaba. Now mastaba are the tombs that were made for noblemen, and it is flat roofed unlike pyramid. I'll draw a rough cross section. Okay, so this is your outer shell. And this is your rubble masonry or rubble core. And this space right here is the chapel. And this is their shaft. This is the closing stone. Which was closed after the coffin or the sarcophagus is placed. Your vault. And this is sarcophagus, which is the coffin or the dead body. Okay, this is mastaba. And they also had a statue here of the dead, and this was called serda. They had a small table kind of structure here where food was placed. It was the offering table or offering chamber. So this is mastaba. And next we'll move into pyramids. So there were 3 types of pyramids before it was eventually evolved to the pyramid that was famous, like the pyramid of Giza. So first there was stepped pyramid. And a famous example for this is Zose Saqqara. Then they had a bent pyramid. They had a bent pyramid and Dasur, Dozier, famous for this. And then the true pyramid, which is the pyramid of Giza. Or Cheops. Now something that is important to remember is the treasure canal was here. The treasure canal was underground, and it was underground for this too. Okay, Yes. And another thing that is most of us remember is the pyramid was based off of cardinal direction. So if this is your pyramid, it was perpendicular properly to the cardinal direction. And the three famous the three pyramids of Giza is, I'm writing them in descending order of size. So first is Khufu, Cheops, then is Khafre, Chephren, and then there is Menkaure, my goodness. So this is in descending order of size. So this is the largest, second largest, and the smallest. Now we'll talk about pyramid complex. So this is your Nile River, and then we had our valley temple next to it immediately, and we also had our Sphinx. And from this goes our causeway, which leads to our mortuary temple. And this leads to our pyramid. So this is Nile, this is your Sphinx, causeway, valley temple, mortuary temple, and finally pyramid. Now Sphinx is a mythical character. It has a human body with it has a human face with the body of a lion or a ram. So human face with the body of a lion or a ram. So it is very similar to how Lamasus in the Assyrian civilization, but in Egyptian civilization it is called a Sphinx, and it is usually uh, present in avenues in the front of the temples. So it has human face with lion or ram body. Now talking about pyramid. Pyramids are usually made of sandstone or bricks, but mostly sandstone. And if you see, So this is your thief canal. Like, this does not contain any treasure, but since the first two form of pyramid contained treasure in the underground area, the thief generally considered it to be here. So this was used as a thief canal to trap the thieves. This is your queen chamber. Grand gallery. Antechamber. King chamber. And these are your air ducts. Okay, it is important to remember that the place that connects the king chamber and the grand gallery is called antechamber. It has been asked in the questions quite some time. Next, what else is there? I think we've covered about the tombs part of Egyptian architecture quite well. We'll move on to the temple. So as I said, there were two types of temples. One is the cult temple and the other is the mortuary temple. Now these temples were for gods and these temples were for dead pharaohs. Okay, and some of the examples that I would like to mention for both is this is the temple of Heliopolis, which is the sun god, and Luxor, Karnak, Edfu, Amun, Horus, and Orsis. And for the pharaohs, there is Ramesses, Seti, Mentuhotep, Hatshepsut, etc. And an important thing to remember about the temple is they were always in the east-west axis, because they believed in the sun god a lot. So it was depending upon the way the sun rise and set. So most of the temples were in the axial direction of east to west. And a typical temple plan would be, they had two obelisks, pylon gateways, avenue of sphinx here, and then a courtyard or a hypaethral hall, and then a hypostyle hall, and then your sanctuary. This is your obelisk. These were generally in pairs. And one second, let me just recall it. Yeah, okay. So they were generally in pair, and their pairs they were placed in front of the temples, and these were considered as a sacred symbol of the sun god. Okay, and they were tapering monoliths towards the top. Let me just draw it. So yeah, they were tapering towards the top with a wider bottom, and they had inscriptions of the sun god or hieroglyphics. Then we had the pylon gateways. Pylons are nothing but, actually, as it suggests, it's a gateway. It looked something similar to this. And then was the avenue of Sphinx. This is your courtyard. Hypostyle hall. And sanctuary. And the lighting used mostly for these kind of temples is clear story. So clear story is, if there's roof structures like this, then this part of the adjoining roof is used for light to let in. They used clear story lighting. And one example that I would like to give is the temple of Kanhun or Konsu. This had a telescopic plan. So this was their sanctuary. As they went in, the structure was receded in height as well as in space. So if you look at the plan also, it looked something like this. This being your sanctuary. And most of the mortuary temples were rock cut temples, and they had protodoric columns. They used protodoric columns. These representing mostly nature, natural elements like lotus or birds, papyrus, palm leaves, etc. And another thing that I would like to mention is two terms. One is kahun, which means enclosed court, and necropolis. Necro means dead, polis means city. So necropolis is the city of dead.